organization preaches stability, security, and sustainability, but in reality, the only constant is change. Every offseason averages 7 head coach firings, and that doesn't include general managers getting axed, which wildly changes teams too. Nobody else is affected more by this constant turnover than NFL players, especially young NFL players, since a front office and coach implement a scheme, plan, vision, and mold their roster around it, but then the next regime usually makes sweeping changes and wants something completely different. This has turned an endless amount of draft prospects into busts simply because the things they excel at are not the things their teams ask them to do. This puts a premium on versatility, more so for players who can fit many schemes because they can do anything and everything, and that's why Jalen Carter is the best player in this year's draft. He has some off-the-field issues which I'll address later, but strictly based on his tape, there is nobody more versatile and nobody more dominant. At 6'3", 314 pounds, he's the best non-quarterback prospect I have ever studied. He is incredibly powerful, incredibly athletic, he is violent, he is vicious, and he is versatile. He can play over the center, guard, and tackle, he can attack inside, outside, through you, he can rush the passer, and he can definitely shut down the run. He combines both power and finesse to keep linemen completely on their toes, then sets them up after he's gotten a whiff of their game plan. Key and Peele hopeful Javontae Spraggins had a brutal day against him, where Carter started him off with some power to get everything else cracking for later. On early downs, he's a little wider in his base to anchor his body and sit for the run, and starting here, we're going to see the different ways he uses his hands. Against a potential run play on first down, he's going to use power to hold Spraggins in place and keep his hands inside, either to bull rush him, which is a power rush straight through him, or yank him down when he's got his hands inside. Carter places his hands inside when he wants to use power, and outside when he wants to use finesse. His hand placement is extremely precise and polished, and he's able to move bodies easier than any college player I have ever seen. To use his finesse move to get around Spraggins, he tightens up his stance just a bit to have better access to his feet since he's taking tinier steps. This helps him keep his pad leverage extremely low so that he can take all of his leg strength and transfer it up into his upper body and hands to hit as hard as he can. Notice the hand placement? They are outside of Spraggins' arms so that he can get around him. He has some of the strongest, most violent hands I have ever seen, where one of his hands is stronger than almost anybody else's two put together. With that outside hand, he pushes Spraggins almost like a top to then use his arm over move. And while Spraggins kinda wanted him to fly upfield because of the draw play, he still had to hold him or he would have blown this up. What makes him so versatile is that he can get around you with speed like we see, but also with power too. He can combine multiple moves into one very fluidly and wreck a game for the offense. Once again, he's tightened up his stance because he is out for blood. He uses his slider stance to generate maximum force to drive Spraggins back, and look at the hand placement. He drives them inside his shoulders to get into his chest and knocks him back, and because Spraggins is thrown off balance, he slides him up to his shoulders to have complete and utter control. Now he can yank his ass to the side. What's extra impressive about this one is that Spraggins is sitting on the very move that Carter gives him. He takes a load step to anchor down against power, then tries to put his hands under Carter's pads to use that low center of gravity to drive up and through him to neutralize him. So Carter just takes the upper real estate on his pads and tosses him aside like a piece of trash. Then when Spraggins adjusts to what he's doing, he is able to make adjustments of his own and shreds him. Spraggins knows Carter keeps grabbing him quickly to get his hands inside for power or outside for speed, so he's gonna hit him first. So Carter fakes like he's coming up at him again, squares him up for the bull rush, then uses a club arm over to leave him behind. Yes, him getting a hit on the quarterback while being blocked by 3 frickin' dudes is impressive, but what's even more impressive is the subtleties of his head movements. He already knows he's going to his left to get around him, but watch his head. This extra little nod sells the bull rush that much more and freezes Spraggins for just that half second, then Carter blows past the rest of Tennessee. Defensive linemen using head fakes during pass rush moves are really like wide receivers trying to beat cornerbacks after all. Corners are trying to defend space, much like offensive linemen are. So just like we saw with Carter, receivers use their eyes and heads to sell a move one way, then go the other, and so he could damn well split outside with some of these head fakes. Versatility is using a wide variety of tricks to get to the quarterback. And before we break this down, just watch his eyes and head. The fake outside to get Cole Smith off balance is at a wide receiver level. It freezes the hell out of Smith. Then Carter wraps those hands around him to grab him and control him, then throws him off to the side. This movement ability is not normal. This is a wide receiver in a 314-pound body using quicks off the line like he's about to moss somebody in the end zone, but with the power to move massive men out of the way. One of the rarer qualities for defensive tackles is outright speed, which we haven't really seen him display so far, just his quickness, but trust me, he has tons of it. When guards keep anchoring down, worried about his power and hands, plus all his quicks to counter back inside and use head movements, he can just run right by you when you're not setting outside far enough. By threatening outside of Stephen Jones immediately, all he can do is throw his hands out as a last-ditch effort, so Carter uses a chop and dip and gets to the QB. He is so versatile, he has so much at his disposal, even speed, so linemen have to account for everything, which lets him go into his bag to pull out another trick. Here he's lined up as a 5 technique outside of the tackle, which shows more of his versatility too, since he's an interior defensive tackle. And for typical, normal human beings in the NFL or college, when a 5 tech lines up this far outside, the tackle has to get outside to wall off his angle. You can't just allow him to run straight upfield to take the edge. So when Carter sees him jump outside, he adjusts his rush and just clubs him. One of the reasons he's one of the greatest prospects I've ever studied is because a lot of guys, even top-tier guys, have 3 or 4 highlights a game. Well, his pop up sometimes 3 or 4 plays in a row. Here, Mississippi State is running this kind of funky jet sweep toss with opposite offensive line action. So Carter just clubs Smith away, and you know you're watching true power when you see a guy unintentionally smash a dude without even looking at him, then he chases down the ball. The very next snap is probably one of the most insane plays I've seen all draft season, where he starts the pass rush by punishing Smith's over-aggressive hands and uses his arm over, but then realizes that this is a run and that he's responsible inside too, so he just casually Dwight Freeney Smith and makes the tackle. Then the next play, Mississippi State is using a fold block to punish his aggression, and while it is the center's job to ride him up the field, he just slips through him and kumbaya. Then, okay fine, 2 plays later he 2-gaps where he has a responsibility both inside and outside of Smith, so he can't fly up the field like he likes to. He has to smash Smith and hold him in place, then shed him after he determines which side the back is running. Well, he does that really good too. We haven't talked about that aspect of things, the running game, which is where his versatility is more important than ever. With half the league basing out of the Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio 2-high safety scheme, a premium has been set on bigger defensive linemen who can control 2 gaps as opposed to just 1. With the Seahawks cover 3 defense, every gap was accounted for, so defensive tackles, defensive ends could just fly upfield and attack as quickly as possible since they knew they weren't going to leave a gap open by doing so. But with the 2-high stuff, since you've taken a guy out of the box, now D linemen can't attack upfield in the same way, especially the D tackles, who have to control 2 gaps like we saw Carter just do. While it is an effective philosophy, it does make your defensive line more passive, but still, Carter is excellent at 2-gapping. He has the power to hold guards up, that's easy for him, but what's critical for 2-gapping defensive tackles is having great vision to see the ball carrier to figure out which gap they should try and squeeze into. He is so strong, he doesn't have to think too much about how to hold up his man. He can just focus all his attention on visioning where the back is. For example, even when the back is pressing the B gap to try and bait him into jumping towards it to open the A gap, where the ball is designed to go behind the pulling tackle, Carter just visions him, stays patient, and then is able to shed his block for the tackle. He's able to play in the Seahawks 1-gap attack style like we saw in the first half of the video, and that's where I'd prefer to see him because he's an absolute menace flying up the field. But he's also able to play in the 2-gapping Staley defense like we just saw, so he can dominate there too. His versatility doesn't just describe the variety of ways he can get past the O-line, or the amount of different techniques he can play up and down the line, but also is fit in every defensive scheme, no matter what the organization who drafts him ends up doing down the road. His off-the-field issues are obviously his biggest concern right now, so while he is the best prospect on film I've ever seen, the maturity question marks don't make him the best prospect overall I've ever seen. The off-the-field stuff raises his bust rate by a couple of percentage points, but from a pure talent perspective, Carter is a cannot-miss prospect. I try not to say generational, because it's silly how often it's used, but he is a once-in-every-10-year prospect on film. Versatility combats change. With the constant turnover of scheme, front office personnel, and philosophy, you want the player who can be dominant enough to excel in any scheme or position you put him in. If Jalen Carter checks the off-the-field stuff, he will be one of the best ever on it.